in 2002, the Federal Transparency Law was enacted in Mexico. Before, every citizen wasn't able to know anything about the government. All the institutions were all closed. No one could even know what the salary of the president was, what the directory or the organigram of each one of the institutions had. And after 15 years, we can say that the framework around access to information has changed a lot, not only because a lot of people is asking questions to the government, but because it has become a tool for journalists to do research, to find corruption, and to identify gross human rights violations. However, during this process, during these 15 years, there's still a lot of things that are missing. The most important one is that access to information is still just for some people from some part of the society that are closer to the information society, to those that have access to the internet or the digital platforms. However, all those vulnerable communities that do not have access to internet are still excluded for all this information that the government is giving. And in Mexico, we have 54% of the population that do not have access to the internet, and this means that these people do not have access to any information. And in Article 19, we tried to bring access to information to vulnerable communities, mainly to women, indigenous women in Chiapas and Tabasco, one of the two states in Mexico with a high margin of poverty. And what we tried to do during this process was to make women know that they could know information about their government, to identify the authorities that could have the information they needed, and to identify the information they need for their development. After 2 years of work, what we realized is that women not only feel free when they have more information, but they are able to participate in a different way within their communities. That's a great thing, because here in Mexico, many women in indigenous communities cannot participate in their general assemblies in their communities. They are not allowed to. And now, since the men can see that women have more information than even the information they have, they are allowing them to participate in order to bring information to their community and to allow development and allow welfare. It is important to say that all of those women that do not want to participate in a social way, they also will feel different individually speaking, because as they say from their words, they say, we thought that we were different from men, but the thing is that we thought that they knew a lot of things, and now we realize that they did not know many things, and that we can share that information within our families and within our communities. I would say that, however, all of these processes, there's still a huge challenge for the government in order to approach information to all these vulnerable communities, in order for them to be able to ask for accountability to their governments, to their local governments. And it is very convenient for the government not to give them that information, to be honest, because they are the ones that can be demanding social, economical, and cultural rights that now are not happening in their communities, such as health, education, the access to the profits of their land and territory. And the thing is that to be able to open that information is to open the path to power for women and men in communities that are like the most of the population in Mexico. I would say that after 15 years, access to information has brought a lot of steps forward for Mexicans. I would say that now Mexicans have more information than we had when the party on rule, the PRI was for 70 years ahead. But I still think that there's a lot of intentions from the public servants to retreat what we have already achieved. And I also think that the bad story about all this is that we in Mexico now know exactly how much does the government steal from the people, but there's no actions against those that did something to the people. You know, we have a lot of information, but the government is not accountable for it, and they do not care. There's a lot of impunity, a lot of corruption. We are aware of it, but there's nothing happening. And that will be it. I think the main challenges in Mexico around right to information are related first to the archives law, because we started in Mexico with the transparency law thinking that transparency was made out of nowhere. And the thing is that there's no processes to generate information. And the government generates information as soon as they get a request of information. So the information is not accurate from one question to another. And that is a huge problem related to archives. The other thing is that since there's no clarity on like all the generation of information and all the process of maintaining information, there's a lot of information that is missing. And there's a lot of information that is being missing, but intentionally. So that's a huge problem that has to be encountered through a very good and strong archives process, but also an archives law. The other thing that I think that is a huge problem is that since we have a lot of impunity and corruption in Mexico, there's a huge intention from all of the institutions and all the bounded entities to actually close information and classify it. So they are looking all the time for ways to close that information and give as less information as they can to society. So they're using national security issues to make to classify information, to make it secret, but they're also using a lot of information or the personal data protection law as a way to reduce the access to information and to erase a lot of information that is related to those public servants that are part of gross human rights violations or acts against corruption. Or corruption actions. That's another big trouble. The other thing that I would say that is a huge challenge for Mexico is that all the guarantor bodies have as main representatives people that are very bounded to the public parties. So they are not actually human rights defenders. They are not right to information defenders. They do not fight for it. So they are actually thinking about the position they are going to get after being in the guarantor body. So what is happening is that they are trying to fulfill the interest of those that put them there. That's a huge thing that we are trying to encounter through a public appointments observatory, and that we try in order to look for the better profiles and in order to see that the people that is there is actually a defender, a person that believes in right to information and wants to do the best of the law they have. And finally, as I mentioned before, a huge challenge is to bring information to vulnerable communities. The asymmetry between those people that have access to the internet and those that do not have access to the internet is huge. And this made a huge exclusion to those people that are actually like in the marginalized world. And that brings more poverty, that brings more inequality, and that's one of the things that the right to information should be targeting as a priority, and that is not doing it.